So I started doing plant medicine and ceremony about 20 years ago when I was dealing with just a lot of stuff from my past. I kind of grew up in a chaotic environment, and I wanted to be intentional about trying to unattach from stories that I had in the past. It's another big thing that I had to unlearn is I am not my story. And that kind of like was the biggest mind shift for me is I am not my story. And the most liberating thing is unattaching from that and creating a new narrative. And especially as women, because we are just dialed into this creation energy because we can create life. We can create any narrative we want. So why focus on some bad story from the past when we have this whole future? So that was another great thing that actually that learning came from ceremony. So started a long time ago. And now I don't really need plant medicine. I just have adopted meditation, prayer, yoga as sort of my moving meditation. And I do a lot of practices like that, breath work that allow me to kind of get to similar states and really process what I'm going through and just have a second to stop and slow down and be more intentional about things. And for me and someone like you that's really fast paced, those little moments where we can have me time and stop and process and connect and dial in, they make a huge difference.
There's so many different places that I want to take this. I'm like, okay, where should I start? So I'm going to start at the end of what you said and then work backwards. So the I am not my story component, that's very profound. And so how did you come to that conclusion, but also how does that show up? How did that show up in your life? And for listeners listening to the podcast, how can you encourage them to question the stories that they tell themselves? Because I think so often with stories, we assume the story is true. And especially if it's something that we've lived our whole lives or a narrative that we've lived our whole lives, it's really hard for us to know what the story is and if it's a story. So
yeah, I think the first question someone should ask themselves is what's the common denominator? And usually it's you. And that's a hard thing, honestly, to look at because it's really hard for the ego and it's hard to look in the mirror and see, oh my gosh, I am creating this chaos in my life. For me, my story was I am surviving, not thriving. So I was on fight or flight mode 24/7. So it actually was a skill set for me in a startup environment, but my story was that I had to react under pressure. So you think about it, if you're in this situation where you're under attack, you have to be super laser focused in the moment, be able to be reactive, essentially, and you don't have the space and time to be intentional and sit on an idea or a decision. You have to react in the moment, be laser focused. It's why I wasn't really good at multitasking, but I was so good at diving so deep, passionately into something and being present. So my present moment was I'm always in the state of chaos, fight or flight, under a pressure cooker, essentially. And it came from just a lifetime when I was younger of growing up in my home, just kind of in a tumultuous situation. And there was a lot of fighting. There's a lot of kind of chaos at home. And then it even dates back to my parents' upbringing and my lineage and my family, like that energetic energy. It transcends through the womb, through your life. There's that people carry on. So I had this like just crazy, I'm always like running around under pressure working. And so I had to stop and unlearn that, which was the biggest gift for me because I noticed that when things were really chill and mellow, I felt uneasy because it wasn't familiar for me. So I would almost create in romantic relationships chaos. I would create more work for myself. I would throw myself into a million projects. I would make miracles happen at work under pressure, but I was kind of calling in this like super busy, chaotic energy. And so it really took me doing plant medicine, ceremony, my mindful practices when I experienced burnout to be like, okay, what is the common denominator? And it is me that's sort of creating my perspective and environment. And now a beautiful thing I say is love is my life language, So my presence, it's actually this beautiful, like loving environment instead of chaotic. And so I'm able to make better choices. I call in better men, call in better friendships. The opportunities I call in are like aligned with what I'm doing with KOA Life. So it's been a blessing in a way.
I love that. And one of the things that I was going to say is that a lot of times as humans and as people, we would rather choose familiar chaos rather than unfamiliar peace. And so that is such a hard thing, I think, for people to step out of, because it's what we know.
Yeah.
And even if we want this thing, like even if we want peace, or even if we want, a different dynamic for ourselves or the way we show up in the world, because it feels unfamiliar, it creates a lot of like that internal disconnect. Yeah. And then something else that you said that was really interesting for me is I read this study, or I heard of the study that, when it comes to things passed down in our lineage, there was a study of rats, and basically what they would do is they would, shock the rats, but then it wasn't what the rats would do that were shocked. It was the babies of the rats. And this is a very, I do not promote animal cruelty, for the record. But the babies of the rats would then be scared of the device, and which again, I don't promote animal cruelty at all, but that to me is so, it's very reflective of the way that our lineage, like we don't always understand where things come from. Sometimes it's stuff that we see growing up. Sometimes it's, and I also came from a very chaotic environment, so I had so much unlearning to do around that. But sometimes it comes from our lineage, as you mentioned. Yeah. So do you want to hit on that?
Well, first of all, I'm proud of you. Oh my gosh, this Morgan version 2.0. I absolutely
3.0.
3.0.
We're on 3.0.
Love. I've seen all the versions.
Yeah.
This one's
maybe
amazing.
I'm on 6.0.
Really proud of you, by the way.
Thank you.
You've done a lot of great work. So it's very interesting. And I think you don't really notice, you're not attuned or aware of how lineages, especially for women, where this where all of this junk can come from. So that's why I love doing things like plant medicine or working with healers. I work with a lot of intuitives. I do a lot of meditation, things where you can be introspective and kind of time travel in a way without sounding too woo-woo, but it does really help you pinpoint where it came from.
We can get woo-woo.
Yeah. I also think it's important to just acknowledge that like women back in the day were burned at the stake for being leaders, medicine women, all of it. So with women in general, there's this lineage of trauma, fear, all of it, and it passes down to all of us who are leading, who are alphas, who are trying to take a stance, because energetically we're trying to be suppressed in society. Mm-hmm. And so there is this kind of notion that's underlying, and a lot of women don't know where it comes from. And so that's why when we get too big or too powerful, it's like everything's trying to put us back in our place. So my sister and I are intentionally trying to break that lineage with us in our cycle, hopefully our children, what we're doing with the sisterhood with KOA, and shift that dynamic and create power and strength and all of that with our sisterhood. So, which
you are, and you will continue to. Yes, I'm very excited for that. Mm-hmm. And something else I wanted to touch on was you've talked so much about the growth that you've done, all of the unlearning that you've done. You were so successful even back then. You're so successful now. So at what point did you make those shifts within yourself? And was it after you had, a couple companies and before this one? How did it impact the way that your work has gone, your life is right now? Tell me what shifts have happened.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I've had success kind of before the old Lex and the new Lex. They're just very, very different. So just to go back into kind of a really quick synopsis of my career, because a lot of my life is entangled, even personal life, with, I'm sure you get that as being a boss as well.
My whole life is one. Exactly.
It's all one. But so I started my first company in 2008 called Navin, an apparel brand with my twin sister. We co-founded, and then later on we partnered with Revolve Clothing and grew it to a really big company. But it was so interesting because I started the company 8 months out of university. I graduated from Pepperdine, and I started it in my front room. And I did a business plan, got a $10,000 investment, thought I was going to do a t-shirt line. My best friend was my only employee and my assistant. And we ended up growing it to a really big multi-million-dollar company. We had 40 employees selling to 500 stores. Grew it really big. It became a celebrity brand. Was such a good time. But it's interesting because, as I mentioned, like I had all of these things. I had notoriety in my own industry, kind of notoriety and fame, which was really fun at the time. I made a lot of money, more money than I've ever really made in my life. It was super fun. I was at every event, had all the things that someone could want when they think about building a company and their kind of dream career life. But I wasn't fulfilled inside. And I was constantly looking for more, and more stimulation everywhere because I wasn't fulfilled inside. And I think I was filling the void of the work I really had to do from the way that I was brought up with things and money and people and entourages and all this stuff that didn't really fulfill me in the end. So I think it was when I experienced burnout with Navin after about, I think it was 10 years of growing the company.
10 years?
10 wow. years of growing
That's
the company.
impressive.
I was doing
No, that's not impressive. That's what we're unlearning.
That's what we're unlearning.
That's not
well, I was doing the work along the way. Some of it was subconscious. I didn't really know. But that's the thing is every bad relationship, every trauma, every hurdle that you overcome, those are all part of the life lessons. So you kind of have to just go with it and throw yourself into it. But 10 years in, I crashed emotionally, physically. It just caved. And so that's when I found plant medicine and healers and therapists, and I was able to start really diving in there. And then when I was running my company, Navin, as I mentioned, my whole world was sort of this, I thrive in this pressure cooker kind of environment, which was phenomenal for work. It was so good to create magical moments and bring in revenue last minute. And, everything was like fly by the seat of my pants. But then with KOA Life, this new company, this is after I had kind of transmuted that way of living. And I now have this like sort of peaceful, really intentional, a little bit slower pace in my life, which is a beautiful thing because I'm now thinking about purpose and intention. And is this serving the greater good? Am I healing people? Every decision I make, it's, being from a creative place, intentional place, instead of just like in the moment and reacting to things. So it's a totally different journey and a different experience. And it's been really beautiful to just wake up every morning and be like, wow, I feel so good. I've a little bit less on my plate in the morning and when I go to sleep, but I go to bed and I wake up feeling excited instead of stressed out and burnt out. And I love that part of my life, but this is sustainable. And I feel like I'm finally really stepping into womanhood the way it should be. Because the feminine energy is really that graceful, fluid, water-like energy where you don't have to try so hard for things to come to you. And as queer women, we're so much in our masculine because masculine is like, let me have this project and be goal-oriented and be tough and strong. But to step into the feminine is really important because that's where you create all the magic.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. So many things I want to say. First of all is something that I adopted as a personal philosophy that came from plant medicine. The ceremony that we did together was I am the magic I seek in the universe. Because I think so often we're thinking about how can we make something happen? What we don't realize is that it's actually ourselves and it's how you show up in the moment. And when you're aligned internally, the magic happens. So I am the magic. I don't have to go look for the magic. I don't have to go, fabricate something. And I love that you are talking so much about how, that shift has happened for you, because I actually had a similar moment as well where, and, to get a little bit personal, but you know
I'm
this
sure
about me. Yeah, you know everything. My mom passed away. It was really hard because I had so many coaches who were like, I would get on a coaching session. I'd be like, I don't feel like I accomplished enough today. They'd be like, Morgan, you had like 4 client calls. You just signed a contract and like you were in, you did 5 interviews. Like you did so much this week that most people don't do in a month. And like, what are you talking about? Where's the disconnect? And I always felt internally like I wasn't doing enough. It didn't matter how much I did or what I achieved. It wasn't doing enough. And then when my mom passed away, it was like, I had to slow down. But in the having to slow down, I mean, first of all, I had never learned to ask for help.
Yeah.
And then learning to ask for help, I realized that it's so beautiful to have a community around you and to have people who show up for you and that you don't have to be, I used to say like, I want 3 of this. I want 5 of this. I want 5 companies. I want, whatever. I realized I don't need to have 5 companies. Like it's better to have a company and to have time for friends and have time for yourself and to have time to meditate, and I think that what you said there really resonates with me. One thing I would like to say is that your products really work.
Thank you.
Because when I used them the other week, my skin was perfect.
That's
right
true.
after that.
The cleanser, use the peptide cleanser.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you like it. Yeah. This is our new peptide infused skincare that comes out in January. You got a little bit.
I'll be the first to buy it. Yeah, I'll be the first to buy it.
And I'm really excited because KOA Life focuses on supporting women to thrive, not just survive aging. And so the main issues that happen with aging are skin issues and then weight management issues. So we focus on skin health and treating the root cause of skin health. And then our topical products have peptides like NAD+, copper peptide, all those good things that really help to heal the skin barrier, help with wrinkles, dark spots, acne, all of it. As someone that suffered from really bad cystic acne, I wanted to create something that was not only healthy, but was actually effective for the skin. So excited for these to come out.